Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the evening session of the El Cajon City Council. The meeting is called to order, and I'll ask the City Clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the record, all council members are present this evening, sir.
Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain for a moment of silence? And Gary Kendrick, would you please say the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. All right, staff, do you have any agenda changes?
No.
Council, any agenda changes? At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time that the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, council, authority, and agency members may briefly respond to statements or questions. An item may be placed on a future agenda. Darrell, do we have any cards under public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one speaker card for item 100, and that's Darrell Priest. Disregard the mayor. This is for item 100. I don't have any speaker cards under public comment, Mayor.
Yeah, but now the cat's out of the bag. We know Darrell's coming. All right, item 100 is a public hearing on mixed-use overlay, creating vibrant neighborhoods, approving general plan amendment number 2016-01, approving zone reclassification number 2320, introducing ordinance approving zone code amendment number 432, introducing ordinance approving amendment to specific plan number 19, and introducing ordinance approving amendment to specific plan number 182. Staff, would you tell us about this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm going to give a brief preamble before turning it over to Tony Shute, our Director of Community Development, and his staff. This, as we tried to describe in the background section of the staff report, is really the culmination of a multi-year citywide planning project. It is, in fact, I think, the most significant planning effort that has been completed in the city of El Cajon for many, many decades. And in my view, at least, it really sets this city up in a very intelligent and appropriate way for the 21st century. And the marketplaces and the kind of populations that we think will want to be in El Cajon in the next few decades. As some council members will remember, this is a step that we brought before council way back in 2013, 2014 with what was eventually a new housing element. This zoning implements that council policy decision those years ago. We had to go through a lot of work, an extensive survey of the city to allocate units, as we wrote in the staff report, where would they do the most good with the least impact. And we think we've accomplished that, and staff will be able to get into more detail about that in just a moment. And this zoning is really for the future. There's not a specific project in front of you tonight, and many of these areas, I doubt that you'll see an actual project for many, many years. In some cases, particularly the Parkway Plaza property, maybe not for a couple of decades. But we have an obligation to do zoning for the future from the state. But more importantly, we did this in a way that we thought would really benefit this community, create true economic development and investment in this community. So with that as a foundation, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Shute, our Director of Community Development. Tony?
Thank you, Doug. Mayor and City Council, 4 years ago, the city was considering a major amendment to its downtown master plan. That's specific plan number 182. Which would have placed about 15,000 dwelling units in an expanded downtown. The City Council considered this a proposal to be inappropriate for the community and instead adopted a much scaled-down housing element, which resulted in a focus of new housing opportunities here in the downtown and strategically spread to other areas in the city. Now, these areas were chosen for both their positive impact on future economic development and to minimize negative impacts for new growth. The City Council held a joint workshop with the Planning Commission in May of 2013 to discuss the strategy and then formally and unanimously approved the new housing element in August of the same year. This adopted strategy by the City Council achieved two major goals. First, it designated specific areas for future economic development, and second, it successfully met the state of California's required new dwelling unit goals for the city, approximately 5,800 new units. Now, it's important to recognize that the city is only required to accommodate for these units through zoning, not build them. The adoption of El Cajon's new housing element represented the first step in accomplishing the strategy. The second and final step was and is the actual detailed rezoning of these designated properties. The City Council began with the first phase of this process in November of 2015 when it held public hearings and upzoned multiple properties consistent with their general plan designation. The final phase is the application of the mixed-use overlay zone. This strategy, in line with the Council's vision, is designed to reinvigorate existing commercial areas by allowing new residential units in close proximity to existing commercial services and community facilities. This approach does the following. It preserves existing established neighborhoods, creates opportunity for new investment based on current market conditions, allows for the formation of activity centers like what's happening downtown in other areas of the city, and it satisfies state's housing requirements.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Melissa Devine. I'm the senior planner that's been working on this project for these last year and a half or so. So I'm going to talk a little more detail about the project itself. It is the application of the mixed-use overlay zone to 4 key areas of the city, encompassing approximately 293 acres. The mixed-use overlay zone will allow for property owners to redevelop properties as they choose with a mix of uses, with commercial uses consistent with the underlying zone, or with residential uses. As mentioned, there is no specific project associated with this that would be approved. This would simply allow for property owners, if they're interested, to develop in the future. In addition to the application of the MU overlay zone, there are some associated actions. One of these is the general plan amendment and zone reclassification for the area around the Arnell Transit Center. This area would transition from historical industrial use to regional commercial, which is compatible with the surrounding area. There's also a zone reclassification for a 6.4 acre vacant parcel on East Main Street, which would be changed to general commercial, consistent with the general plan land use. There are also some zoning code amendments. The first part of that is the update of the MU overlay zone with the proposed areas on the map, as well as the creation of a new sub-designation, the mixed-use residential required zone, and some further refinements to development standards. We'll also create new standards in the zoning code for common interest developments, which will streamline multifamily condominium developments and increase homeownership opportunities. There are 2 amendments to specific plans. The first is the downtown plan. This would align the approval process for projects in the downtown plan with the MU overlay. And there's also an amendment to the Parkway Plaza specific plan. This would require any future proposals where they are looking to reduce the amount of commercial square footage in excess of 10,000 square feet to come back before the City Council as an amendment of the specific plan. And lastly, there's a program environmental impact report that was prepared to analyze potential environmental impacts. And as a result, there is a mitigation monitoring and reporting program which proposes feasible mitigation measures. This is a map of the 4 key areas. On the far west, we have the Fletcher Parkway corridor, the Parkway Plaza, and the Arnell Transit Center in the center of the city, the downtown area, as well as the East Main corridor between approximately Pepper Drive and Broadway. These 4 areas represent important commercial areas to the city. They're in close proximity to community facilities and services. They're served by transit, and we think these are prime opportunities for new mixed-use districts. The red on the map reflects those properties that would receive the mixed-use overlay. the property owners would have full flexibility to redevelop with residential, commercial, or a mix of uses. There is a new mixed-use residential required, which is represented with the yellow on the map, and that was applied to properties where we have property owners who are interested in potentially doing residential, as well as properties that were more historically developed with residential use. And in that particular subdesignation, if a property owner wished to completely redevelop, to demolish all the buildings and redevelop, they would need to dedicate 50% of the floor area to residential use. So the mixed-use overlay zone, as I mentioned, there's a full menu of options, but the underlying zoning does remain in place. There's no changes to that with the exception of those few properties I identified earlier. This means that the permitted uses that are currently in place remain in place, and we're not creating any non-conforming uses. In the mixed-use residential required zone, as I mentioned, that they would need to dedicate 50% of the floor area if they completely redevelop, but they still have the opportunity to continue with their commercial uses, expand them, or reconfigure them. And then there are a few properties with an underlying residential zone that would be allowed some additional housing units, but they would not be allowed for other commercial uses not currently permitted. I'd like to take just a couple minutes on each of the areas to highlight some important details about each one, and then I'd like to share with you some of the work that was done to envision the types of projects that could result out of the mixed-use overlay. So the first is the downtown area, which is obviously, as we know, the center of El Cajon. And the city has promoted for some time mixed-use development in the area, and we have had some successful mixed-use projects. The city has also invested in street improvements to create a more pedestrian-friendly downtown core, and we believe that additional residential units in here, additional residents in the area would create a more complete neighborhood and create a stronger retail market to support the existing retail that we have and potentially more. There are some areas identified in yellow that would get that mixed-use residential required subdesignation, and those provide sort of a natural transition from the main area of the downtown area to the surrounding neighborhoods. In addition, you'll notice on the map there is that 6.4-acre vacant site on East Main that's also identified as a prime redevelopment opportunity or development opportunity. So the city engaged with an architect and urban designer to do 3 site analyses that I'm going to share with you. They did site sketches to test the feasibility of projects under the MU overlay, and they did some photo simulations to visually illustrate the concepts. So this is a site in the downtown area. It's vacant on Avocado and shows the type of mixed-use development that's possible in our downtown area. It's a smaller, slightly over half-acre site, and you can see that it could support about 5,000 square feet of commercial, 9 residential units in a high-quality, appropriately scaled project for our downtown. This area is the Parkway Plaza and the Arnell Transit Center area, which is our important regional shopping center that we want to preserve and see be successful over time. So the intention there is really just to allow for complementary residential uses at the mall and not replace or see the mall reduced in any way. And there are examples across the country of indoor malls where they've added additional residential or other uses and surface parking lots, and where they've transformed them and actually taken indoor malls and made them outdoor malls with a mix of retail and housing. So we think there are possibilities for the mall potentially to adapt over time to the changing retail market. And then the application of the mixed-use overlay to the Arnell Transit Center area would allow for transit-oriented development, which recognizes the investment in transit infrastructure that has been made in that area. The next area is the Fletcher Parkway corridor. So in this neighborhood, we have existing community facilities, library, rec center, schools, all in close proximity to a commercial corridor that's surrounded by residential. So to build upon what's already there, the MU overlay would allow for some potential high-quality mixed-use projects. And I would like to note here we did have a resident who did reach out to us after one of the articles and was in support of the concept here. And then this is an existing commercial site, the corner of Garfield and Fletcher Parkway, and shows what could possibly happen if you take and bring the retail out to the street allow for residential units behind to transition to the neighborhood. And here you're creating spaces for outdoor cafes and things like that, more interaction with the street, which helps to transform into more of a pedestrian-friendly area. And the last area is the East Main Street corridor. And this is the site of the potential new Kaiser Hospital. And here we believe there's the potential for more of a campus-type environment where you have a major new employer, economic driver in the region, and you could have housing in close proximity. So there are 2 sites that are identified for the MURR, the residential required, and those are 2 existing trailer RV parks where the property owners indicated some interest in doing residential. So this is actually one of those trailer RV park sites, and you can see what they were able to do in about 7.5 acres, which is to create some vertical mixed use fronting on East Main Street with some residential, potentially condominium development behind that. And you can start to imagine what it might be to have some new condo homeownership opportunities for nurses or staff at the new hospital right in close proximity. So a program environmental impact report was prepared in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. And the purpose is to identify any potential environmental impacts and to disclose those to the public and decision makers and to determine if there's any way to reduce those impacts. So due to the citywide scale of this project and the uncertainty of which projects might come forth on which properties, we analyze the maximum potential build-out. And we don't anticipate that happening. As the city manager mentioned, there may be few projects and they may not happen for quite some time. But we did have to analyze that, and there were some potentially significant impacts that couldn't be mitigated. So we couldn't reduce those impacts to less than significant. And those areas are in air quality, traffic, and in land use and planning as related to traffic. So even though we can't mitigate them to less than significant, we did include some triggers or thresholds for each of the traffic impact areas. So we know at which point, which number, the 1,000th unit would possibly cause that impact. And so we can monitor development over time, and we can introduce appropriate mitigation measures as appropriate or do further studies. There are some impacts that can be mitigated, and those are included within our proposed mitigation monitoring and reporting program. There's a framework in there for new development and certain measures that future projects will be required to comply with. And this will actually help to streamline future development projects in compliance with CEQA and reduce the amount of time and analysis that they need to do for their CEQA processing. There are findings that have been prepared and are included with your resolution. And then because of the unmitigated significant impacts, there is a statement of overriding considerations. And the City Council will need to find that there are legal, social, or economic benefits of the project that outweigh those potentially significant environmental impacts. Some of these benefits can include multifamily housing choice and the development of underutilized sites, resulting in increased property tax revenue. So there have been multiple opportunities for public input throughout the duration of this project. We've kept a website up to date with information and provided regular updates to the Planning Commission. We had a community open house in January, mailed out about 1,600 postcards to residents as well as property owners, and had about 14 people in attendance at that meeting. The consensus was generally people were looking for more information, although we did have a couple of concerned citizens with some concerns about parking availability in the downtown. And then we had some articles in the East County Magazine as well as the El Cajon Gateway. And in preparation for the public hearing at Planning Commission City Council, we mailed hearing notices to 1,300 property owners, which included those affected, as well as those within 300 feet of the project areas. And to date, we haven't had any significant public opposition. So the Planning Commission did, on October 3rd, recommend City Council approval of the project as proposed, and it was a unanimous vote. And this was after a series of public workshops. So This project is, as the city manager mentioned, really the culmination of the city council strategy over the last several years for how to provide for new housing for our residents. And it's a market-driven approach. It allows for housing when the conditions are right for it. And it has the potential to revitalize some of our older commercial areas and allow for these areas to remain successful and adapt over time as the retail markets change. New residents in some of these areas would also support existing businesses, and then these neighborhoods can transition over time to places where people can live, work, and shop, increasing public safety by creating daytime and nighttime uses in our commercial districts. This plan will also minimize any secondary effects of providing for new housing by distributing it throughout the city. Staff recommends that City Council approve the mixed-use overlay project, and if the City Council chooses to do so, we do ask that you request that the City Clerk recite the ordinances by title only. And this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Council, any questions of staff?
I had a question, just some clarification on the mixed use. Did I hear it right that it was the first floor is 50% retail and 50% residential?
So the mixed-use residential required, those areas identified in yellow, are the only ones that would have a requirement for residential in the future. Those areas identified in red that would just receive the mixed-use overlay have no stipulation requiring residential use.
But they could be all residential.
That's correct.
The only ones that require some, the commercial, the ones in red, and it's a minimum of 50% commercial on the first floor?
There's no minimum requirement for commercial.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bob? You might want to stab me.
I have a question. With the internet purchases now, a lot of the brick and mortar stores are really getting cut back in their sales, and I know that we have two at Parkway Plaza that are kind of iffy, probably Penny's and Sears, both are probably not long for the future. It's hard to say, but I've read that in a lot of different articles and things, and their earnings are coming down, they're losing money, and we don't know how long they can last. And we might find an overabundance of brick and mortar with commercial because of the fact that there's so much internet buying now. People are spending billions and billions of dollars on internet purchases, and a lot of these stores now are becoming very, or the facilities are becoming very smart, and they give you overnight delivery. They let you exchange clothes and all that and everything real easy, and they're getting into clothing lines and things like that, which they haven't done in the past, but it seems that more and more stores are, their sales are dropping. And I think we're going to see a problem with that in the future, that it's going to be more internet and less brick and mortar. So maybe we're overreaching on the commercial aspects of this with the mixed use. Maybe we have enough commercial already.
Well, I think if I can address that, Councilmember Cloud, I agree with everything you just said. We are in fairly constant communication specifically with Parkway Plaza. I will disclose to Council that Sears is in the process of showing us plans that will dramatically shrink that store, but open it up to additional other retail. But you're right. All across the country, the path that you've described is occurring. The real net effect, if you looked at all this citywide, actually isn't so much to increase commercial. It was to acknowledge exactly what you said. We believe, not that we want this, but we're trying to look at what's going on in the marketplace. We're going to have less retail brick and mortar in the future than we do right now. Right. There is no question about that. We either allow it to go abandoned, which would be a disaster, or we look at what the marketplace is doing and try to encourage new development. which is to open up more residential opportunities. But in doing so, and I'll give you a perfect example that council approved about 18 months ago, I think. I'm always wrong, right? It's 15 months ago. The old Salvation Army building here, which is still there and very much an eyesore, the city council approved. That's an old commercial building, if you will. It used to be a commercial building before it became Salvation Army. There's just no retail that wants to go in there anymore. No, they marketed it for years and couldn't get anything. So we finally got a developer, landowner, Salvation Army sold to him to do a mixed-use project. So the council approved this about 15, 18 months ago. First floor retail, so it was less retail really overall than it used to be. Second floor, a modest number of residential units. I think it was 14, right? Did I guess right?
15.
15. See, I was wrong. That's a perfect example. If you look up in the Broadway, that east Main Street area, or up in Fletcher Parkway, the phenomena that you just mentioned, I'm sure we're going to see. We don't want to see those properties just slowly die, get abandoned. We want to open up the private property owners with investment opportunities. If they don't need them, they won't take advantage of them.
Right.
Because, if they can still do retail, they're still going to do retail.
Right.
As far as Parkway Plaza, that's a huge issue. They are very aware of the marketplace. They're talking to us about what their vision of what they could add in. For instance, we have suggested to them we would love to have a third wonderful hotel. We think a mall is a great place to put a new hotel. Don't know what's going to happen. They agreed. They said that's a more innovative use in a mall that you don't see that much of. Residential going vertical to create a new marketplace, new customers for the mall, is an idea that's happening all over the United States right now. It's not, we're tapping into that idea, we're not creating that idea. But it is to take advantage of the situation that you just mentioned.
And there's some malls around the country that are just completely closed and not even open anymore.
There are, but I will tell you, and this is to be optimistic, Parkway Plaza is very healthy. It is one of the healthier malls in San Diego County right now. We all kind of know our friends next door in Grossmont Center.
Right.
Not so much so. There's been all kinds of talk that Grossmont Center may come down or partially come down. I don't know what's going to happen over there, but we've heard that kind of conversations. I think there's a good chance within the next 5 years, all those big anchors at Parkway Plaza will go out of business or consolidate. JCPenney, Macy's, if I'm guessing, they're going to end up one store. Mm-hmm. Sears will probably cut in half and then eventually disappear. So this is anticipating those future opportunities. What's going to happen there?
Well, maybe some residential, like you said, which I think makes a lot of sense because these Internet buyers are just not going to the stores like they used to.
Steve?
So the current zoning would allow a hotel on any of these parcels?
A hotel use is a conditionally permitted use, but it
Okay.
is allowed in all commercial zones.
So CUP to go with, to allow it to operate that way. Now, whenever we talk about adding 5,000 housing units, we have to keep an eye on infrastructure. So if we were to put a lot of units out at Greenfield and Main, which is a really tough intersection traffic-wise, at what point do we say, well, if we allow them to develop that many units there, we're going to have to completely refigure that intersection or something? At what point do we have to talk about infrastructure changes?
In terms of traffic, there is a threshold for that particular area, and I want to say it's about 300, a little over 300 units, at which we need to look at studying future traffic improvements or look at alternatives in order to avoid some of those significant impacts.
And then along with traffic, we have sewer. Is the sewer system capable of having this many more units at this site? Do we anticipate any changes to our sewer system, or is it existing adequate for all of these?
So we did analyze the full build-out of the project and compared that to the sewer master plan. This would not necessitate any additional capital projects over what is planned.
And I guess just a note, we would have to consider police and fire. If we were to add 5,000 new housing units, 10,000 new people, a 10% increase in the city, of course, that would affect the staffing level, perhaps even the location of fire departments or stations, if you were to concentrate people in one part because of this development. So we'll have to be smart as we approve projects, as we consider the demand placed on fire, police, sewer, traffic.
Any other questions? Thanks. Nice presentation. Darrell, do we have any speaker cards on this item?
Yes, sir. Now we can call upon Mr. Darrell Priest.
Mr. Priest.
Darrell R. Priest, 124 West Main Street, El Cajon, California. And I wholeheartedly endorse this program that they got going. I've worked with staff a little bit. We've talked about it. And as you remember before, the prior administration was going to have 12-story buildings and 8-story buildings and all that, and that would have been an unmitigated disaster. And I think I'm understating it, so I fought that tooth and nail, and we got that. And this is a blueprint for the future. And I think one thing that I've been developing here for 30 years, I think that there's less than 60 acres of vacant land in El Cajon, and I own over half of it. Own it or control it, over half of what's left. So I got a vested interest. And I think for a lot of years, people were afraid of density, like you were talking about, all these people coming in. But really, it's not density isn't the problem, it's quality. And I think in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the prior city council, and not through any, just basically through ignorance, and there was an abundant amount of 1- and 2-acre little houses, and they let all these apartments come in. But if you build quality, the density does not become a problem. And I think what you find too, and I think Steve, Councilman Goebel, that you'll find out that, and I've done a lot of studies, that most of the calls go to very few actual units, if I think I'm correct, in the city, and usually there are dilapidated, older places that maybe the landlord's not here. And I know in the 80s and 90s, the apartments and the density, we really focused on that. But what we should have really focused on was the quality. And I think that the type of projects that the city is requiring is going to take major investment. It's going to take major dollars. It's not going to be cheap. And that's going to force the landlord, whether they live here or not, to do a good job and to take care of their product, of their housing. And I think the ownership matters a lot. I know that I was good friends with Conrad Previs, and he was buying units that were managed by people out of town that didn't care about El Cajon. He came in and started the first, I think it was Clean and Safe or whatever they called it, with the police department, and he didn't have any problems in his units. He ended up kicking out about, a third of the people. And if you really look at El Cajon from where we were at in the 90s and where we're at now, it's amazing how far we've come. Because, I was here in the 90s when, I can remember talking to staff that we were going to lose the city, with all the apartments and everything. And so, and what this will do, and you're going to get 1 or 2 people that are going to dip their toe in, is it's going to raise everybody up in the city, right? As the projects raise, everybody's value goes up. And even the apartment owners that have the Ray Huffman stuff that was built in the 60s and 70s, they're going to have to step up their game, or they're going to be out of, they're going to be out of the game. I know the project that I built right across the street here is 103 units, and I remember the staff back in, I think it was 2003. I'm getting a little old, and my Alzheimer's kicks in every once in a while. More recently than later. But I remember they were afraid of density. I think we were at 17.8 acres, and I remember Dwayne Geyer, arguing with the city council that this was going to be a slum in 5 years. But it's not a slum in 5 years. The project's been up now for almost 14 years. And it's still, the houses are worth $450,000. I know Mayor Wells actually lives in one of the units, so he can attest to it. And so it's about quality, not about density. And I think this is a great plan. And, and nobody can really, like we talked about Parkway Plaza and how many units, but really if you look at it, the infrastructure is already there. The bus lines are there, the sewer's there, it's right in the middle of the city. And so that's probably where this stuff's going to go. I read a report, I don't want to belabor it too much, but actually the people that are going back to the stores now are not people my age, but actually the millennials are actually shopping more in the stores than the older people. So, who knows where this retail is going to go? But if you put 5,000 people over that retail, they're going to walk down and want to shop. They're going to have their friends come over, and so that's probably, the way of the future, and I think that's happening all over the country. So I would wholeheartedly support this. I have absolutely no property that's in this other than downtown, but I'm not going to redevelop, stuff in here. But I think this will open up hopefully the floodgates for possibly myself or somebody else to do these kind of projects. And as long as you stick to the quality, it'll be density's not a bad thing. And I think, again, that's what we focused on was density. Density is not bad as long as you have the quality and the right sponsorship, the right ownership. Either the people owning it are a good developer that owns the project. So, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Yes, Bob.
Dale, some of these projects that were built in the 60s and 70s, before
Yes.
I got on the council, by the way,
Yeah.
they just have a parking lot and a building, and that's all. There are no amenities or anything like that. And that's
Right.
a big part of the problem. And I've been looking at some of these designs, and I don't see much open space in them to where if people have kids, where are they going to go?
I think, Bob, a lot of and this isn't for everybody, and that's the same thing they said on the project that I built across the street.
Yeah.
And so before it was one size fits all. Got to have a big yard, got to have room, but not everybody has kids.
Right.
And so and we got plenty of housing that they can buy in other parts of town. And I think if my math is right, this is like 293 acres. And the city is 9,300 acres. So you're only talking about 3% of the city, so the other 97% is going to stay exactly, like it is.
Right.
And a lot of the millennials, which I don't understand because I'm old school, I live on a big 2-acre lot and overlook a lake and all that, but they like this stuff, right? And they wouldn't want to live where I'm at. And so this will fit a need and a niche. And it also brings people down here that spend money, and also brings people down here that protect their neighborhoods. Because when I first built on Main and Magnolia, and I built the row homes, the 28 row homes on 1 acre,
Right.
They also said that was going to be a slum, and the police were going to be there every night. Well, it's just the opposite. Those people that live there, they own their houses, and they fight for that neighborhood. I mean, we couldn't have put anything better there. And you can drive by the project. I think it was built in 2002, so it's, 15, 16 years old. And, it's not a slum. It's all owner-occupied. There's a few rentals, but they watch it. And so I think you can't take a one-size-fits-all. And so it's kind of like going golfing. This is a 9-iron or a 1-iron, and we have enough of the other stuff in town.
Just so the stuff that's built is more condominiums and not a lot of rentals, because that really hurt El Cajon when we had so many rentals.
Yeah. And the other thing I think, too, is the condominium conversion is probably economically getting ready to come back, and I think that
I hope
benefits
so.
the city, and I was part of that committee back in '92.
That was my thrust for 10 years. It took me to
Yeah.
get the first guy to go, and then it was like an avalanche.
Yeah, yeah.
Until the housing boom busted.
Yeah. The problem that we have is the rents in El Cajon. I don't know if anybody's looked at what a 2-bedroom apartment rents for now.
Yeah.
It's like $1,700 a
Yeah.
month. But we're almost getting there economically where it's going to pay off
Yeah.
to do the condominium conversions
Right.
again.
I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Darrell? Ben?
I'm going to pick your brain a little bit because I know you're an expert on this.
Sure.
I think that I see a lot of the designs, and it reminds me of like Mission Valley area,
Yes.
where it is. But would you concur that then that's a different demographic altogether? You get a lot of the younger people there, and then every time there is any sort of shift in the economy, that's like a bubble that always pops. And that I know because the people I know, myself included, like we'll go pick up like condos cheap there because you get a lot of these younger people that are making a lot of money at a certain point in their, you know what I mean? And then the economy dips, and then all of a sudden their 1-bedroom, 1-bath for $2,200 is no longer feasible. That worries me. And then another thing is Middle Eastern people like to live in big houses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a cultural thing, and getting them into, so then we have to look at who we have currently in the city and what we're going to get more of.
Yeah.
And then, because, if you rewind the tape back 25 years, 30 years, a lot of the Middle Eastern community was in Spring Valley and a lot of these smaller apartments, and then now they're all in Rancho San Diego with the bigger houses. So I can't help but think that, and when you fast forward the tape now, and then with more Middle Eastern people coming in, they're going to be looking for some of these bigger houses. I know, like, 2 weeks ago, we approved those bigger houses for that Middle Eastern developer that was here. I think knowing the direction of where the city's going to go, mixed use is brilliant, but then I always think, how about for this city, and who's going to be living in it in 10, 15 years, what the demographic is going to look like. So as an expert, do you concur with everything I said as far as, I think Middle Eastern people like bigger houses, and doesn't that help?
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that. The only problem is we have almost zero land. You got a city of 9,000 acres, and there's basically about 50 to 60 acres left that you could actually do something like that. And I also like bigger lots, too. I've got half-acre lots on Granite Hills Drive, and those houses are going to be 3,800 square feet, and I've already got 2 of them sold for over $1 million. So I don't mind building bigger houses when it's appropriate. The problem is, if you're looking at the kind of lots that they're rezoning, they will never be bigger lots. I mean, you're never going to take, I think Parkway Plaza is about 80 acres. There is no conceivable future that I could see that you would take down that shopping center and put 160 half-acre lots in there. I mean, unless a nuclear bomb hits, and then we're all in trouble. And I think with the real estate, too, we've gone through these boom and bust, and I've been right there with them. But we're in a little different period now to where it's so hard to qualify, and we've washed out all the weak buyers that nobody's seeing this. I had a meeting with the second in command of Northern Trust, this 19th biggest bank in the United States, and he handles everything from the west of the Mississippi. And I said, are you seeing any distress, any cracks in the armor? Number one, in California, the answer is no, and anywhere in the country, because the lending standards are so much different that everybody that's made it through this last baptism of fire is solid, and so you're not going to see these booms and busts like you saw before. It's just not going to happen. I don't see it. We've never had a building boom that's lasted this long. But it's really not a boom. We've just kind of crawled. We've just kind of gone up on this wall of worry. And so right now I'm actually as bullish as I've ever been. And I called the last recession, and I sold 400 lots in 2005 when everybody thought I was crazy at the very top, because I could see it coming. And I don't see any signs of distress in the market. And also, too, California is becoming a different place to where a lot of people, again, like living this way, and these aren't lots that are ever going to be half-acre, quarter-acre lots. It's just never going to happen because of the economics. So what will happen is, I think Doug alluded to it, if we don't let this kind of development happen, the buildings are just going to decay and going to go down, and you're never going to get that point to where you have enough density where you can mow the building down. And that's a lot of the problems we had with the apartments, and that's why we had to do the condo conversion, because we had to make it economically feasible to go ahead and do that. And that was forward thinking, too. I think we started that in 1992, but it took to about 2000 to start the conversion. And I think the city is being proactive and getting out ahead of this, too.
If I could add to that in response to Councilmember Colossio's question, we generally more around the perimeters where we're going to have the single-family homes. We've actually had more single-family homes built in the city in the last 6-7 years than multiple-family. They've been great projects. South of Chase, we've had 3. In the early part of 2018, I believe we're bringing what we think are going to 2 fantastic single-family neighborhoods over in the Shadow Mountain Church area. We're actually going to be proposing that we go from like a half-acre to quarter-acre so we can have more big homes there. So we've actually got not a lot of land, but where we've got it, we are pushing hard for very high-quality single-family homes, because whether it be the Middle Eastern community or anybody else, there's still a demand for single-family homes. And the stuff that's got built in this city in the last decade or so are fantastic single-family homes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Gary?
Well, one important thing to remember is that we're looking at a higher density in a very small part of the city.
Yeah.
And as much as some people don't like it, as we have more and more people, we're going to have more and more density to fit them in there.
Yeah.
And again, and I've been seeing this for years, just like Daryl has, there's nothing wrong with density if it's done really right. I mean, look at some of the residential skyscrapers in downtown that sell for $1 million, and look at University Town Center. And as the quality goes up, they can sell the property for more, and there's huge demand right now, and that density will also help the local retailers. So that it'll. So I think this is a really good plan.
If I may say, I built a Borrego health clinic in San Bernardino, and I bought a building that probably should have sold for about $5 or $6 million, an old AAA building for $1.3 million. And so we went in and talked to the planner in San Bernardino, and in the 80s, it was a really thriving area. And so we went in and talked to the head planner, and we said, what happened here? I'm just curious. And he goes, we didn't change fast enough, and we let it decay to a point that it got past the point of no return. And so I think the staff is doing a really good job that they're being proactive. They're getting ahead of it because believe it or not, even in Southern California, you go to San Bernardino, and I did one in Barstow, they let stuff get past the point of no return, the economic life, and then nobody wants to go in there. And so it's just a sad situation. Like I said, I got a beautiful building on 590 D Street in San Bernardino, great area, and they let the whole thing, they just didn't get out ahead of it. They stuck to the old way of thinking. They weren't proactive like this. And the head planner said, we just blew it. We should have done something like this. And so I commend staff for getting out ahead of it and not letting that happen. This is my hometown.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to make these changes because this city has really been on the roll the last few years.
Yes.
Who would have thought we'd have 2 hotels coming in, a Mercedes-Benz dealership? So the investors are looking at the city and say, something's going on here.
Yeah.
And someone's going to be the first one to do the high-density, really nice property, and then the other investor is going to say, hey, that sold, now we're going to do one, and maybe we'll do it 10% better than that one. And that's how you end up completely transforming an area.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think I was the first one to do row homes on Main Street that we actually went to Portland and Seattle, saw how they did it there. Now a lot of people are doing them. Yeah.
Any other questions for Darrell?
I think it's a good program. I think it'll be really good, just as long as the staff's on top of it. They don't let any 60s or 70s apartments come in.
I don't think that's happening.
Not your staff, but years ago staff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really informative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other cards?
No, sir, we don't have any other cards, Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion then to close the public hearing.
Second.
Please vote.
The motion passes, Mayor, 5-0.
All right, council, more discussion?
I think we like it.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I'd move 3 through 8 that we approve staff recommendations.
Second.
Please vote.
The motion carries, Mayor, 5-0 again.
All right, and I'd like to ask our city clerk to recite the title of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor. On the first ordinance, an ordinance rezoning property located on the west side of Marshall Avenue between Petrie Street and Parnell Avenue from the M Industrial and CM Heavy Commercial and Light Manufacturing Zone to the CR Regional Commercial in the property located on the north side of East Main Street between First Street and South Anza Street from the RS6 single-family residential minimum 6,000 square feet to CG General Commercial, General Plan Designation, Regional Commercial, and General Commercial, APN numbers 482-19034, 482-19040, 482-19047, as well as 489-13019. On the second ordinance, Mayor, the ordinance reads, amending Title 17 of the El Cajon Municipal Code for the application of the mixed-use overlay zone to various properties, amending the mixed-use overlay Chapter 17.135, amending Chapter 17.125 to include new provisions for common interest developments and adopting mixed-use overlay and mixed-use residential required overlay zone map. On the third ordinance, an ordinance amending specific Plan Number 19 to require further review for a reduction in commercial space of 10,000 square feet or more. And lastly, Mayor, the fourth ordinance reads, an ordinance amending specific Plan Number 1A2 to eliminate conflicts between the downtown specific plan and the mixed-use overlay zone, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Darrell. Melissa and Tony, thank you very much for all your hard work. Just by looking at it, I can imagine how many hours were spent on this, so we really appreciate it. And all the other staff within the city that you brought into this, please convey our thanks to them. All right, we are at adjournment. The adjourned regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 14th day of November 2017, is adjourned until Tuesday, December 12th, 2017 at 3 o'clock p.m. Good night, everybody.